Good evening. We're going to call to order the special meeting for the Akron Public Schools Board of Education for Tuesday, November 24th, 2020. Roll call, please.
Dr. Akbar.
Here.
Mr. Alexander.
Present.
Ms. Autry.
Here.
Mr. Bravo.
Present.
Dr. Hall.
Aye.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Here.
Mrs. McKittrick.
Here.
Thank you.
And if everyone could please mute and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. And as we begin, we want to introduce I just want to introduce our special guest, and then I think Mr. Pendleton's going to jump off for just a moment. But joining us this evening for our special meeting is Steve Horton, our consultant from OSBA, and he has provided you with some materials in your email. So if you haven't had a chance yet, you may want to pull those up, and actually you'll be looking for two emails from Steve Horton. One of them contains the draft, the agenda for this evening, the draft timeline, and a draft of the district profile. And the second email contains an updated or revised version of the district brochure. So I asked Mr. Pendleton to jump off for just a moment, and I'd like Mr. Horton to weigh in, and then we'll let the board chat real quick. Mr. Horton had indicated to Dr. Akbar and me during one of our conversations that typically the only staff member that he has seen kind of assist the board through a process like this is the treasurer or CFO. And so we just wanted to have a quick conversation and make sure the board is comfortable if we continue to include Mr. Pendleton. I should probably also add that, unlike our normal meetings where we would maybe be having these in person, and it would be less likely that there would be an audience. Of course, this is a public meeting and streamed live via social media. So there's probably little to no difference between being in the meeting and not. And Mr. Pendleton is also the host. So for what that's worth, I want to throw that out there. Mr. Horton, if you have anything to add.
No, I mean, that covers it. It is not unusual at all for treasurer to be involved, at least in the planning meeting.
Does anyone have any objection if Mr. Pendleton rejoins, or would you prefer to have him stay sort of offline?
I don't have any objections to Mr. Pendleton being a part of the meeting.
Neither do I.
No objections here. None.
All right, thank you. We'll ask him to rejoin the meeting then in case we need anything as well. Tonight's meeting is open discussion. We did not notice an executive session, so we will not be taking any executive session, nor in our discussions do we think there was probably a need for one, at least at this early stage in the game. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Horton to start heading toward the agenda. Great.
Thank you. And thank you all for having me here tonight. I'm excited to get started. I'm excited that you're having me work with you on this task. So I'm looking forward to digging in and beginning that work with you officially tonight, and the next journey that we're going to be on in the next 3 to 4 months or so. With that said, as Mr. Bravo already pointed out, I did send out agenda and timeline. So the very first thing I would like to do is share my screen and go to the timeline. I'm going to bring that up here so we can talk about that. That's oftentimes the most difficult thing to pull together among all the board members as we talk through these dates. So I want to tackle that task first, and then we'll get to the next part of the agenda. So with that, Yeah. So is everybody seeing the timeline now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So I want to talk through these dates. And the other part of this is as we go through this, it also allows us to talk a little bit about the main points of concern here that you see on the timeline as far as the process goes and the things that we all need to be aware of. So as we solidify dates tonight, I'll share this finalized timeline that we do tonight with the people we have internally that are assisting with the search. And then I'll also send it out to all of you after the fact, so you have that. And then this will be the important document that we work from in terms of moving forward and making sure that everybody's on the same page and that we're all working together on this. That's probably the most important part of it. So with that said, let's go to this document and get your calendars out so we can agree on some important dates here. I already sent you a draft of the brochure. I gotta say, you guys create quite a challenge in writing a brochure. As I went online and especially on your website, looking through all of the things that you have going on in your district, in your different buildings, it was difficult to kind of pare that down and pick and choose the things that I really want to highlight in the brochure. So I want to make sure that all of you, in your spare time, read through that just to make sure that it reads okay. Am I covering the things that you think need to be covered? Are there things that aren't in there that should be in there? So this is really just a starting point. Whatever you tell me needs to change or be adjusted or corrected, it certainly won't hurt my feelings. I want to be sure that I hear from you on those and make sure that that is everything that that we want it to be. And I'll talk a little bit later in the agenda about the steps to get that completed and posted online with the search notice and the work that we do with that as we move forward. But I have, yeah, go ahead.
Since you asked about the brochure,
Mhm.
what would you like us to provide that feedback to you? Nothing gets me more excited than when someone gives me a red pen and asks me to edit something. So I've got lots of little things, but do you want us to email that to you, back to you individually?
Yeah, it's most effective you just email those to me.
Perfect, thank you.
So yeah, we'll handle all that through email. I don't want to get into all of that tonight. That would make for a very long meeting. And I want to give you more time with it. But as you look at the timeline that I've got up here in front of you, we want to try and have that brochure designed and finished. And that means we have images from the district to include in it. We have a graphics person that'll put together a color proof of that that I'll share with all of you before we actually say, yeah, this is good, let's move forward with it. So I want to leave enough time to get that done. As we officially post the search is the same time that I want to be able to post that finalized brochure. That is an important part to the candidates. Oftentimes I talk to candidates, one of the first things they'll ask me about is, do you have the brochure or is the brochure online? So I want to make sure that they have that there to look at. Thus, the starting date that I put on there of December 14th. I wanted to get this posted, and I think that was kind of the sentiment that I got from Mr. Bravo and Dr. Akbar when we talked earlier in meetings about wanting to try and get it started before the end of this year. So I chose December 14th as a launch date. We could move that up earlier, or we could just leave it there if all of you are comfortable with that date. I'll throw that out to you guys.
So I have a question. So I could be wrong, but I'm not sure if December 14th is actually doable. I don't know how much time you need, but before we put the search out there, I think we need to finalize advanced APS, because that needs to be in the brochure when we launch. So
Okay.
I'm not sure how long that will take, but I don't think December 14th, we might have it done by December 14th, but does that mean you'll have what you need
Okay.
to?
Okay. Yeah, fair
Yeah.
enough.
And just so you know, advanced APS is basically the strategic direction that we're moving for the district, which we
Okay.
need to adopt officially as a board. And I know we have a meeting on the 14th as well as on the 30th. So Lisa just left the meeting, by the way.
Yeah, I just saw that flash up as I was turning back. And she's having a couple of issues. That's the second time she actually has gotten kicked out of this one. So let's maybe give it just a moment.
Just you got kicked out as opposed to leaving?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my guess because it happened a minute ago as well. But she was able to join right back that time.
Okay.
Give us 1 second, please. All right, Miss Mansfield's going to dial in for the time being. All right. Welcome back, Miss Mansfield. We paused for you. Dr. Akbar, you were talking about meetings on the 14th and the 30th. I could say the 30th. And
Yes.
16th.
Yes. So again, I don't think that it will be done before the 14th. So I just wanted to put that out there, that we may be looking at a little bit later start date because of that.
Yeah.
Let me ask Mr. Horton too, and this is, I guess, for Dr. Akbar and Mr. Horton. Is that customary for a district brochure, a district profile? I mean, would we put that, would we include sort of our strategic plan in there, or?
Well, to some degree, a lot of places, districts have wanted me to mention it, at least talk about the fact that they have that strategic plan, include vision and mission statements. That's typical. As far as getting into detail in terms of what the goals are, what strategies might be as you move forward. Not so much, because that tends to get outside of the scope of what we can do in this type of brochure. But if it were on a website, we could have a URL that certainly people could go to from the brochure. So yeah, I mean, those kinds of things are not unusual.
Well, we're actually looking at only 3 big buckets, so that could definitely go in this brochure. And I don't know why we wouldn't include it if that's what the superintendent would be measured to for the next 3 years. That's the direction of the district. I think that we would be doing ourselves a disservice if we don't put that out there in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I think it should be in there.
Yeah, and my question was more, I think what you answered was kind of some of the, like how detailed or are we saying that there's the existence of one, and here are the major themes that one exists. So you're probably right, Dr. Akbar. Then I mean, if I have something, the draft compilation, I guess, of everybody's remarks back to you, we get that back to the board. I don't know, given everything else we have, you may be right. I'm not sure if we'd be ready to approve that on the 30th, maybe by the 14th. How far do you think that pushes us back? I mean,
well, at this point, it's all fluid. So purely up to all of you. The only reason why I looked at December 14th was because it allows us to post early enough before the holidays. I hate to post things as we get into the week of the 21st, because then we're into the week of Christmas and New Year, and things kind of get lost there. So I would rather be able to post before the holiday, or we can wait until afterwards. We can post it as we start the new year. And
Yeah.
it wouldn't in any way adversely affect your search if we did that.
Well, I think, so I'm glad to hear you say that, Steve. I mean, so, because the other point I'll raise, and this is the only one I'll raise with respect to the brochure for now, the rest I think can wait to email, but, I just would want to make sure, customarily this board, selects new leadership in January as well. And so to me, it just would make sense that was reflected in the brochure. Because I put out a brochure on December 14th with, current leadership, and then that changes in January, and then candidates maybe are put off by, okay, well, what's going on here? There's a change. Is that a red flag for a candidate? So for me, I just would want to make sure that the one issue I'll raise with you tonight is I think that's something that we should consider, whether that's whether that's this board decides earlier, like maybe we decide in December what we're doing in January, and so that's reflected, so that can be reflected, or we wait till January to actually discuss leadership changes, and then that goes in the brochure that is published after that happens, or to coincide with that. But again, I just think we should have that part at least should be right in that brochure at a minimum.
Yeah, and I think your points are well taken there. It's not, that part of it doesn't concern me, because there's not a candidate out there that doesn't know that the organizational meeting happens at the beginning of January. And that's when boards decide on president and vice president. So, if we want to reflect what the new leadership is going to be in the new year, that would make sense then. And like I said, holding off until January does not mean you won't have a good search. Our best recruiting typically happens in January, so I don't think you need to be concerned there.
Yeah,
I have a quick question. Typically, how long do you leave the application process open? Because I'm looking on your timeline, and if in theory it closed the 14th through, and then began on the 14th of December and closed on the 22nd of January, is that a typical amount of time to leave that process open, or is that fluid as well?
That can be fluid as well, although I would caution you against not leaving it open long enough. I like it to be open, 5, maybe 6 weeks. If you leave it open too long, it tends to lose momentum. We tend to lose focus if that application period is left open too long. I've experienced that with searches, and that can be a negative. So the sweet spot in there is somewhere around 5, or like I said, maybe 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
And Steve, is that being posted? I know that we keep kind of talking about this a bit, but is that being posted state and nation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, this will definitely go out beyond the borders of Ohio.
Okay.
So think about that. Do we, in light of the discussion about the strategic plan, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I agree that I think that is something that we should highlight in the brochure. Should we hold off then until January?
Sounds like we're looking at maybe January 11th.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a date that I was just looking at that I was going to ask you about.
Yeah.
Does that sound better to everybody?
Yeah, I think the 11th would be better.
Yeah. I'm there too.
This is Diane. I agree. Sorry, Diane.
Say that again.
No, this is Diane. I would agree with the January 11th date.
Okay. Okay. Good. Well, then let's set that. And that give us, plenty of time to get a brochure together and to get it posted. That certainly would not be a problem. So, okay. One of the things that we talked about when I talked to you about the search process was community and staff focus groups. So I wanted to get your input on that. This is going to be a little bit tricky, obviously. I don't know that certainly November and December don't look good in terms of the pandemic and the pandemic numbers. Are your schools all remote now in terms of learning?
Yes.
Okay. I assume that, but I didn't know that for certain. I would move that we hold off on these focus groups also until January. I like to do these toward the front end of the recruiting period, as opposed to later in the recruiting period, but as long as it happens somewhere in there. We use the feedback internally. It goes into our approach toward the interviews when those actually happen, and our own screening internally. And then the information is also great for all of you that comes back from those. So that's a valuable piece of information and insight that comes back from those. So we need to discuss, when we could target as dates for that. And we could make it as open as just saying we want to do it the week of, and let's pick a week that we think would work. And then I can work with your people internally on if we're going to do in-person focus groups, what dates would work best and how to schedule those. Or do we want to approach them electronically? So I will put those two questions on the table. First of all, do you think it would be possible to try and do in-person meetings?
I mean,
Say with the numbers the way they are right now, I guess we can wait until the beginning of the year, but I wouldn't be comfortable with in-person meetings.
yeah, I'm with Ms. McKittrick on that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Patrick, can I weigh in on one thing? I will tell you that if it comes down to brass tacks and we're actually hiring a superintendent, I don't want to hire one that I haven't met in person one way or another, even if it's from across an empty room. I mean, we can get pretty far into the process before we get to that, but I think that there's a lot about a person that you read that cannot be delivered on a Zoom or a virtual. I think that holding some of it virtually makes sense, but I think ultimately there has to be some, at least for me, face-to-face, and that doesn't have to be a full board, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, we talked about the finalists having an abbreviated opportunity to meet leadership at least, or whoever might want to. Because one, if the person's internal, then, they don't need a tour of the smallest building perhaps. But if they're external, maybe they would, and maybe they would want to see some of our schools, ones that have been rebuilt, and then those that have not, so that they can see, the best of both worlds that we have to offer here, even though we have more schools rebuilt than we don't, but we still don't, So I think that we talked about that, and I know Patrick and I were both okay with, Mr. Bravo and I were okay with doing an abbreviated type meet and greet with board members.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I think, well, on 2 counts there. One is I agree 100% that in-person interviews is much more valuable, especially when you get into the finalist level of the interviews. And I haven't talked to a candidate yet that would rather do a virtual interview than in person. They want to be in person. They want to be able to meet with all of you face to face. So, and we can work that out. I'm sure you have large enough spaces where we can accommodate social distancing and be safe in terms of protocol, and still be able to make sure that you have a good quality interview time with the candidates for first and second rounds as we move through that. So I agree with you, Ms. Manfield, that we should be thinking about doing those in person. So I think that's important. We with the focus groups, the other thing I was going to suggest, and I've done this in districts actually very effectively, is to put together electronic survey type events. We do it through SurveyMonkey, but it allows me to ask the questions of people, and we usually do that by targeted groups that we'll talk about a little bit later, and send those links out to the groups and let people respond. I've actually gotten pretty good response using those and good input. I like being able to do in person, but I do question if we can do that effectively at some point in January. So I'll throw that would be the second part of it. Do you have a problem with approaching the focus group aspect of it electronically?
This is Diana speaking. I think we should allow for both options if possible, to do it safely in person. And I would be one that would be willing, to be whatever I needed to be for in person, because that's equally as important as well, to see and feel the energy and body language of what the community and parents and whomever else, is concerned. So I think it's important that we have both options if we are able to do so safely.
Okay. Yeah, the difficult part of this is obviously not knowing at this point what's going to happen with all of that. So I think, well, what I can do is I can put together the electronic version for all of you to look at and approve. It's pretty straightforward. And then we can also move forward with, and I'm looking at the week of January 18th as potentially time to, if we can get into the district, schedule those. Does anybody else? Well, and here's the other thing I'll say about the focus group part. I usually respectfully ask board members not to attend those. I want to be able to have conversation and whomever helps me with those to be able to have just very open dialogue with whomever comes to those events. And that tends to happen better, honestly, if board members and administration are not in the room for those. So no offense there, but I would ask you guys to stay away and let me do those on my own. So,
Hey, Steve, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is Bruce. And I don't want to put any more work on you, but do you think that you can, as far as planning wise, that you could plan one virtually just to be safe, and then maybe in person, that way, whichever way we go, or if we use a mixture of both, that we have that planned out?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm thinking, well, I think we should move ahead with the electronic platform regardless and put it out there that way. And then we can work on the focus group part of it, or the in-person part of it as we get closer. But I want to make sure that I have an opportunity to potentially get those set up, in terms of who I'm meeting with, venue, times, so that we can properly advertise them as well. That's something we can't overlook, because we'll have no attendance if we don't do a good job of getting it out there to the staff and the public. So to answer your question, yes, I can plan on moving ahead with the electronic. And we can definitely have those ready to go. So if it's all right,
Steve,
yeah, go ahead.
This is Derek. So again, obviously this is, the first superintendent search that I'm going to be a part of, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions that maybe you're unaccustomed to being asked. But as relates to that community and state staff focus groups, what's the purpose of those groups? I mean, because those folks are not interviewing candidates. I mean, what is it that you? So, for example, asking board members to not be to not be present. I guess I'm trying to figure out what is it that you're looking to get out of those meetings that you feel like would be stifled or chilled by the presence of board members.
Well, when we go into those, and this has nothing to do with interviewing, obvious, other than the fact that what I collect from those kind of feeds into the interviews. What we're looking for is just to hear from people what they think the major issues are in the district, the things that would need to be addressed or worked on by a new superintendent. I always ask them as well, what are the opportunities? What are the things that are going well? And to get them to share that. And the only reason why I ask for board members not to be there is because we find that people, especially staff, are more open to sharing. If they know that it's anonymous, there's nobody else there listening other than me or somebody from OSBA, and they'll just share more openly and give us more honest feedback, because that's really what we're looking back for in this is honest feedback. So that's the only reason why I ask board members not to be there. But we ask them, and we ask them what they're looking for in a new superintendent. What would they like to see in a new leader in the district? So does that make more sense?
So it does. I'm laughing at Ms. Autry's comment about how honest people were on the campaign trail with us as candidates about what they wanted. But yeah, that was certainly true. So obviously, Steve, then, so hypothetically, assuming that we're not present, though, that feedback, you're basically aggregating that feedback and you're sharing with it. And I mean, that still gets shared with us, right? You just blind it out. You identify the data. Yeah,
nobody gets identified as to who said what, but you do see everything that people share with me.
Gotcha.
And I send that back unfiltered. There's no editing that goes on with that.
Okay.
Okay. So I was going to move forward here, if it's all right with you guys, and I'm going to look specifically at January or week of January 18. As a week I'd like to target for those meetings, if we can pull those together, or maybe the week of the 25th, but somewhere in that area. And I think that timing will work out well. We need to talk about the next line as far as the recruiting window for it. Obviously, I don't think we want to open it on the 11th and close it on the 22nd. So we need to think about an appropriate closing date. Open on the 11th. What if we set Friday, February 26th as a closing date?
I don't have any objection, but again, I mean, if it's customary, Steve, then I mean, I don't,
Okay.
So you're saying you're saying February 6th? Is that what I heard?
No, February 26th. February 26th.
Okay,
it's the
got
last
it.
Friday.
Okay.
It's the last Friday.
That's definitely better.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to leave more time. I think that gives us plenty of time to put the pool together. And I pick on that date because I don't think we'll go back again. Yeah. I don't think I'm going any longer than that, actually.
Just for process sake, do you do anything with what comes in on the weekends?
After the 26th? Or throughout the recruiting period? Oh, throughout, yes, we do. The candidates are free to submit their materials and become an official candidate anytime up until midnight of the 26th. Unless we reset the default, but that would be the default, that at midnight on February 26th, that's when February 26th.
So yeah, so the reason why I asked is if there's nothing going to happen on Saturday or Sunday, would it make more sense for that date to be Sunday at midnight? Or if you actually do work on it on the weekends, then the Friday makes sense. Just thinking about process wise.
No, we could do that. And then that day, or actually it would be Monday, first thing, on March 1st would be when I open the candidate pool for all of you to look at and evaluate. Does that feel better if we just let it ride through the 28th on Sunday?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So then that means that March 1st date would be when you have an opportunity then to go in and review the candidates yourself. Obviously, we want to leave you time to do that. And we also then do our screening internally. I don't do any of that officially, and I don't do it with my internal screeners until we actually close the date. So we would also go to work on that starting on the 1st. So that brings us to, let me get into March here, the week of March 8th, in terms of when we can come together and have a screening meeting. And this could be done virtually, or it could be done in person. This is one of those times when we can have an executive session, because we will go in and talk about candidates very specifically. I'll share with you the results of our screening process and who we think rises to the top in terms of first round. And just so you know, we're typically targeting 6 to 8 candidates out of the pool to move on to that first round of interviews, to be invited to that. That's not carved in stone, but that would be our typical target number. And so when we come together for our screening meeting, we would be sharing our thoughts and notes about the candidates, and also talking to you about how you feel about the candidates. And we would then come to mutual decision as far as who's going to be invited to that first round, for the first round of interviews. So I'm looking at that next week, in the week of the 8th. Is there a date the week of the 8th that works well for all of you in March?
For the screening meeting?
For the screening meeting.
We have school board on the 8th, at least right now.
Okay.
Women's endowment
Honestly,
is on the 10th. But other than that, I don't see anything that stands out to me, unless anyone else does.
I'm trying to get a sense.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just gonna say that week of the 8th, the 11th is good, the 10th is good. Well, maybe not the 10th. Sorry. Yeah, that 11th or the 11th or 12th. That's a Thursday and a Friday.
Same here. Although I have something on Friday. Sorry, I have something on Friday at 5 p.m., but I'm with Val. The 11th looks good to me.
Yeah, I can. depending upon, you said at 5 on the 11th. That
No.
should work. Just
No.
I can set any time that works for all of you.
just know that that's the state of the schools right now at 11:30.
You know, at the risk of sounding glib, might it not be easier just to put out a doodle poll with these dates, and just that way you can get all the feedback, as opposed to all of us spending this time checking calendars and going back and forth? We could do all that offline, it seems to me.
Okay. Who's speaking?
I mean, you know, if the rest of you want to continue on with this, we can. I'm just trying to maybe find a more efficient way of kind of doing this.
I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with either. I guess it. Yeah, I'm okay with either.
Okay. Then I'm just going to put in week of March 8th here. And then we can, I'll send out something to all of you with potential dates. For that week, and then we can narrow that down. So I'll do that when I get back in the office on the 30th. Does that sound good to everybody?
Yeah. Will you also? Are you going to be doing that also for the week of what I'm guessing would be March 15th for first round interviews? You're looking for 3 days, or 3 times?
I'd like to have 3 times, hopefully starting the week of March 15th. If those dates bleed into the week of the 22nd, that's okay. We just don't want them to be too spread out. But we want 2 dates definitely. Typically, the first round interviews happen on 2 days. And so we could do, if it's 6 candidates, for instance, we would do 3 candidates on one night, 3 on a second night. It's possible to do 7 or 8. You could do 4. But that's where I like to have a 3rd date. If you go to more than 6 candidates, which is certainly your prerogative as we review the candidates, then that 3rd date comes into play, just in terms of effectiveness in the interviewing. So yes, in terms of the first round interviews, go ahead.
Can you explain how much time the first round candidates typically have? And then additionally, sorry that I didn't think of this before I saw the timeline, but I'm wondering what's the rationale behind waiting until the applications close to open up the portal?
It's just the way it works best, honestly. So that you have the complete pool, because up until that closing time, candidates have the option to submit. They also have the option to withdraw from a search if they choose to. And there could be reasons why that happens. So it can be somewhat fluid up until the time we close that. So at that point, when that pool is closed, I mean, that's it. That is your pool of candidates to review. So it makes it a little cleaner. And honestly more effective that way. Does that answer that question?
I think I missed the last part. I heard the cleaner part, but then you said something else.
Oh, it's the whole screening process is more effective if you have a closed pool and there's no potential changes, additions or subtractions from that pool while you're screening.
Once they're submitted, do they also have the opportunity to update or change up until the closing period? I know you said they can submit or they can withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
Also, because I'm not familiar with your system, but do they have Can they edit, I guess?
They can if they go internally to our administrative people and request to do that. Typically, once they say submit, we treat it like you put it in the mail in the old paper days.
Okay.
That comes to us. So typically not, although we've had candidates for one reason or another request that they be able to go back in and change something or update something, and we will typically allow them to do that. But they do have the right up until that closing date, if they have submitted an interview or submitted their materials, and for whatever reason they decide they don't want to remain in the search, they can pull out of the search and withdraw themselves at that point. And it does happen from time to time. Okay. So I'm looking potentially at the week of March 22nd for those first round interviews. Do we want to approach that the same way? That I would send something out to you and let you select dates?
The 22nd or the 15th?
Well, that would be March 8th is a screening meeting. Oh, well, no, if we could do it the week of the 15th. Well, let me backtrack on that. If we ended up deciding, for instance, on Thursday, March 11th for the screening meeting, I would want to make sure that we have enough time before we start the first round interviews that I can contact candidates and let them know and get those scheduled. So it's a little tough if I said, hey, you've been invited for an interview. Can you interview on Monday the 15th? That would be a little tight turnaround potentially for candidates. So I like to leave enough time in there to get them scheduled and reasonably get that on their calendars for that interview time.
Agreed. I only asked because in the first version, they were just a week apart.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. If we don't go until like the 11th or something, then that makes sense.
Then we would be looking at probably the 17th or 18th of the next week at the earliest for that first round interview night. So we may very well be getting into the week of the 22nd. So if I'm going to send out a doodle poll for those, I would include those dates in the week of the 22nd in that poll. Is everybody else okay with that?
Yes, I'm good with that, Steve.
Okay. Just for purposes here, I'm going to put week of the 15th or 22nd. And so I think what I want to do is let's send out that poll for all of you. Let you decide on the most appropriate screening date, and then I'll send out a poll for the first round interviews based on whenever that's going to be. That looks like an appropriate amount of time for that.
Mr. Bravo, can I make a request too, that once we do have dates, can we see if Ruth can put them all on our calendar so that at least it holds? I know it probably goes without saying, but just saying it out loud.
Yes, thank you.
Steve, if you want to copy me on those, I'll make sure that they're on the board's calendars.
Okay.
Sorry, Brian, forgot you were here.
No, it's all right. I'll make sure that it's all on your calendars.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so we're talking then about second round. I think when we had kind of met early on, Mr. Bravo and Dr. Akbar, and kind of talked through this, we talked a little bit about those second round of those finalist interviews. And I'll point out that the first round interviews are very tightly structured. I will work with you to create an interview script so that each one of those candidates hears the same questions. Each candidate comes in on the hour, and they're about 45 minutes or so on those first round interviews. Second round, though, is an important time because it opens up for the finalists in terms of do you want them to meet with potentially staff or administrators. I've had finalist candidates meet with people from the community, and they're part of that process in terms of being able to ask questions, provide feedback to the board, obviously, as well as an all-important second round interview with the board itself, with each one of those candidates. So there are a number of ways to go there. And obviously the challenge here is, even in March of next year, we don't know what the situation is going to be with COVID. And to be able to make any serious decisions on that, because ideally, if we were going to do something that would involve stakeholders, and I like for that to happen in the second round, we would facilitate place and time and bring people together and plan out how we're going to do that. I don't know if we can comfortably do that right now. I guess is my thought. So if you guys have thoughts on that, speak up. But I think we just need to kind of hold that and say this is when we want dates to be, or potential dates, and then we'll have to work out what the actual process is when we get closer to that. And obviously, the best possible world, we maybe can be together and we can actually have focus group type groups that come in. And so I guess I should ask right off the top, is involving stakeholders something that you want to consider as we move into those second rounds? Because honestly, I have boards that say no, we want to just interview the candidates ourselves and make the decision. So I will throw that out to all of you.
I think that we definitely want to hear or allow them to get a chance to at least do a meet and greet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I would call that an interview, but a meet and greet definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Akbar. I think we should have maybe a meet and greet for them, but not an interview. The last final interview should be us interviewing those candidates to make a decision or determination on who we are going to select to be our next superintendent.
Absolutely, absolutely. That part will definitely be there.
And I agree with that. I'm sorry, Derek. I think that again, that's another thing where it's one thing to see how someone talks to the people who are going to be his or her boss. It's another thing to see how they interact with someone who's also their boss, but can't hire and fire them, etc. So that it's a good thing. Again, that's one that I might want to see even more so than the other, just because I think you get a lot watching how people, how they interact with the people who they really work for.
Okay.
Wait, I guess I'm confused by that, Ms. Mansfield. I mean, I guess I was confused. Can you unpack that? So you said who they really work for versus.
Well, they really work for the constituents, right? So that's what I want to see. How do they interact with the people that they really work for? We can hire and fire, right? But they're the ones that a superintendent works for: the students, the parents, the community, and how you treat those folks is really important. That's the most important.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any issue with that statement. I just would want to make sure that it was to Mr. Alexander, Dr. Akbar's points. I mean, I just would make sure that we're drawing a bright line here between a meet and greet and an interview. I don't have a problem with candidates meeting and greeting with community stakeholders, whether that's parents, teachers. I mean, I think that's important. But at the same time, I think there needs to be a bright line that, hey, this is a meet and greet, but we are the body that hires and fires, to your point, Ms. Mansfield, and I don't think anybody else should be involved in interviews except for the board. So I think we're saying the same thing. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay. And to be clear, when we have done the interview format, the kind of facilitated question and answer format with finalist candidates, it is for the purpose of those who are involved in that to be able to just provide feedback. And so, I said there are a lot of boards that feel like that's very valuable. But we have also done the meet and greet format as well, where you just, the candidates have an opportunity to meet with people, to mingle with them. When I've done those, I oftentimes like to leave a platform at that evening that for the candidates to be able to share with people a little bit more about themselves. And I've even done that as kind of a surprise attack a couple times at the board's request. Let them come in and let them mingle and let people meet with them, and we'll have a nice time with them. And then, put them on the spot and say, spend 5 minutes talking about yourself and sharing with everybody what you'd like to know about themselves. And it just kind of sees how do they react, how on their feet, kind of thing. So those are all things to consider. And like I said, I personally would feel more comfortable if we were a little closer to that time to have a better feel for what the environment's going to be, and what we actually can do with people coming in and in terms of gatherings. There's a part of me that fears whether or not it's going to be much different from what it is right now, honestly. So if we look at that, again, if we just look at a week, we're now looking at the week of the 29th or April 5th. You guys have major issues with either of those weeks?
I don't see any.
Could you say those dates? Say those dates again, please.
Week starting Monday, March 29th or April 5th.
Neither of those are school board weeks.
Okay.
While you guys are looking at that for a second, can I just clarify? I want to make sure I understand what Dr. Hall was saying. Derek, are you saying that you don't think they should take questions from a crowd? I mean, I don't see an interview where they're sitting down and talking to people. I'm thinking more about what Mr. Horton described as there are going to be times when not only do you face are you giving a controlled speech, right? But that you do have to take questions on the fly. And I think that's a really important part of a superintendent's job. So I just want to make sure that you think that might be a good idea. And we just lost Val, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'll wait till Val hops back on before I answer the questions. Is that fair, Ms. Mansfield?
Yeah. Oh, there she is.
Welcome back.
Sorry.
Hey, Val. Make sure that, so Ms. Mansfield asked me a question. Ms. McKittrick, I just make sure that Ms. Mansfield, can you repeat your question so that way she can hear it and then I'll answer it.
Yeah, I'm just double checking to make sure that I'm on the same page with Dr. Hall on, gosh, now I can't remember exactly how I said it, but just that it's okay to have, if we did a meet and greet, that it would be something where people could ask questions. I'm not talking about sitting down at a table and asking an interview question. I'm talking more about off the cuff kind of, more like what you would face in the community, because I think that's just as important as how you give a controlled speech.
Yeah, and to be clear on this, I never allow these to be free-for-alls, these kind of events. So if we do a question and answer type period with them, it would be facilitated. I typically come in and if people want to ask questions, I ask them to submit them to me on index cards so that I can control what is submitted and what actually gets asked.
Yeah,
again,
I mean,
much more controlled environment than just people coming in and firing questions at somebody.
Yeah.
And is this part of the first round interview, or is this part of the second round
This is
interview?
the second round we're talking about right now.
Okay, thank you. That's the part I missed. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So to answer Ms. Mansfield, to answer your question, I guess I'm talking about more of a common sense definition of those terms, right? I mean, a meet and greet, of course, you're asking questions in a meet and greet. It's just a meet and greet. I mean, anybody I think we've all been part of meet and greets before. There's an exchange of stories and an exchange of ideas, and there's questions that both sides are asking each other, right? I mean, but that's very different from a structured, hey, you're being interviewed by this group of people, so sit down and get ready to give your elevator speech and then answer questions. I mean, that's where I guess that's why I'm saying that it's a bright line, right? I mean, the folks who are doing the meet and greets, they are, these are not people who are going to be making a definitive decision about who does and doesn't get hired. Sure, feedback, I'm sure will be conveyed back to us as to how a meet and greet went, right, Steve? But that's different than saying that these people that are in the room are deciding whether or not you get hired, because that's why you have a community elected board. That's our job, right? The community elects us to then make a determination about who gets hired. I mean, so that's where for me,
that came to a public meeting would think they were making the hiring. I think that kind of, I guess, though, we must be on the same page, because I can't.
think we are. I think
okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, we are. And also too, let me just add one more layer here, Ms. Mansfield, and toss this back to you. That is, there are different types, and this is where I'm a little confused still, I think, right? So there are different types of community stakeholders, right? We have parents and teachers, but we also have, for example, the mayor's office, and we have GAR, and we have United Way, and Academy. So these are other stakeholders, that may want to, have some meet and greet time. So those meet and greets might, is just, especially with those particular stakeholders, I just want to make sure that those were meet and greets and that those were not structured as interviews, and so I could see us bringing in United Way, JAR, ACF all together in the same meet and greet, and let them all kind of sit down with the finalists, and let that be the meet and greet, so, but that's not an interview, so that's where,
and that's not what I was thinking about at all. I mean, I'm thinking before times when we could all be in a gymnasium or an auditorium, and you might have I'm just thinking constituents. That's all I was thinking about. I wasn't thinking about sit downs with stakeholders like that. I was thinking constituents, stakeholders, and as in parents, taxpayers, students, those kind of folks. That's all.
Well, no, and that's why it's a question, right? So is that what we're going to limit it to when we say community stakeholders? Are we just limiting it to parents, teachers, etc., or are we going to go so far as to include foundation folks, right? As an example. So that's I guess I'm asking that question back to this group.
Derek, I'll answer that question. I think we should have.
Okay.
I'm sorry. All of them are part of the community, and I think are stakeholders, because they do a lot for us and do a lot for our district and for our students. But we also want the parents, so the parents can be able to see and maybe talk, and other community members and maybe or organizations. But also, I think including some of the kids too, so the kids can get a feel, and they can get a feel what type of kids we have in our district. So I think that would be pertinent to have all those individuals meet and greet with the potential superintendents.
Yeah. So I saw that guy Bar's note, and I'll defer to him in just a second. I just want to ask a follow-up question. So, for example, when the United Way hired Jim Mullen, when they were candidates, the United Way, did they include APS board members to do meet and greets when they made their hire? Just as an example.
I don't think they had us to do a meet, to make the hire, but I think just so they can get a feel of, who we are. We've been invited to a number of events that we had with those organizations to meet the new people or potential people coming in, but we didn't make the final decision.
And we weren't nearly as partnered as we are now.
Right.
Either. I think it might have been a different situation given the partnership that we have now versus when he was hired.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm asking, right? Because again, you know, I just want to make sure that I understand kind of the history and the present day circumstances, and then where we think this is going in the future. Because I mean, we're so at present day, we're so tight with United Way that just as you know, just as I could see them wanting to be involved in a meet and greet with potential candidates, you know, I would feel the same way. You know, if Mr. Mullen went someplace else, or you know, Miss Mayor went someplace else, and they were hiring a replacement, I would think that we would be you know, at the table the way that they're asking to be at the table with respect to our search, right? At least with regard to meet and greets, and just make sure that we're all on the same level playing field here.
Right. Agreed, Dr. Hall. I agree.
Okay. So, okay. So I think the meet and greet idea can certainly work. We'll have to work out details exactly of how that'll work. And I will also throw out there that I think there's great benefit in working it out so that all of you are present for that as well. To Ms. Mansfield's point, there is value in seeing how candidates interact with stakeholders. You know, to be that fly on the wall and be able to know, you know, how they're greeting people and how people are responding to them. I think that can be very helpful, and that's what I like about the meet and greet format. And if you decided, we could also make that more of a formal spend time, allowing people to submit questions to be asked of the candidates specifically, in kind of a forum type situation. I've done that probably more times than not in the second round in terms of allowing stakeholders to be involved. And again, how do the candidates handle the questions? How do they respond to the people? Those are all valuable things to be able to witness. So, so we need to be thinking about that as we come up on that Monday of March 29th and March 5th in those 2 weeks. And I think I'd like to spend some time now, having listened to all of you, put together a couple of scenarios for how these might be handled that I could send back to all of you and get your input back on that as we move forward. Again, you know, hopefully we can do something. Does that sound acceptable?
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. Okay. So the taking action to employ, I'm going to leave that as TBD right now. I want to have a little bit better feel for how the second round is going to go in terms of timing. You know, and then keep in mind that the action to employ does not have to happen at a regular board meeting. You can schedule a special board meeting to come together, and that's also a great opportunity to, if we can, open it up to community. The night that you're actually going to take action with your new superintendent, have the new superintendent there. It's a great time for superintendent family to be there, for people to be able to meet that person and have a little bit of time there. So it's a bit of a celebration time, which I would love to be able to happen. And so, you know, that's potentially in April, but I'm going to leave that as TBD at this point. So, does that sound good? I think we've got the important dates in terms of when we're going to launch and when we're going to close the search on here, which is important for me as I move forward. I want to get this in here as well. Okay. Are there any other questions about this part of it? Obviously, we've got a lot of things we need to get worked out between now and end of February. Any other questions?
I don't have any at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Quick question, can you send that updated timeline to us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll do that after we're done here tonight. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you again. I hate not being able to see you when I'm doing those other things. Specifically, I want to go to this second part of the agenda and just spend a little bit of time with you here, talking through the 3 questions that I have on the agenda and getting your feedback on that. This is important for me. One, as we review candidates, ultimately, the information you give me here is important, combined with information that we get from focus groups, whether electronic or in person. It's also, like I said, I like to take these points and what I hear from focus groups and kind of weave those into the questions for that first round interview portion of it. So look at that first question, the major issues. What are the things that the new superintendent needs to know about or take into consideration when he or she takes over?
Well, for one, I think he or she is going to have to figure out how best we recover from COVID, with academically, of course. And then I think another thing will be a levy. We're assuming a levy does or doesn't pass in May, I guess. Well, that we put one on in May, and then whatever the results of that are will have to be taken into consideration as well. Those are 2 pretty big things.
You're going to have one on the ballot in May?
A levy?
Yeah.
I probably, and we're looking for May
Okay.
at this point.
Okay. Good. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Steve. I was waiting for Miss Mansfield to go, but I'll hop in. So I think major issue. I mean, issue doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, right? I mean, so I think issue you could use the word sort of initiative or challenge, and I would say that our college and career academies would be another sort of major area of emphasis. That obviously anybody that we would hire, we want to make sure that they understood that model, that they were supportive of that model, and would be 100% committed to its continuation in perpetuity. So that would be something that I'd want to make sure that we talked about, in our profile, that hey, that we are a for next generation city, and and we're committed to this concept. Because again, there may be superintendents out there that may say, hey, listen, like I'm not a believer in that model. And so going to a school district where that board is going to expect me to, ensure that model succeeds, that's something I'm not interested in doing that. So I think that's something that I'd want to make sure that we were communicating up front.
Sounds like that's one of the non-negotiables.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I echo what Dr. Hall is saying, and you probably stole the words. I don't know that I was going to say non-negotiable, but we've invested a lot of time and energy and capacity and work and sort of years of building this college and career academies model to where, it's just been fully implemented in the high schools. Very recently, we're pushing it down into the middle schools, which we've been having discussions about yet even earlier this evening. So yeah, to Dr. Hall's point, I mean, that ball is in motion, and it's I don't think we'd be looking to change direction at this point. So not that we're not open to improving our processes always, but I mean, that's a big transformational change that we're making. So we do need to highlight that commitment somewhere. Right. I think also COVID recovery in terms of an issue, obviously they're going to be facing that wherever, that person lands, whether it's here or anywhere else, but certainly how it impacts our district, depending on where they're coming from and what they're used to, and our community. that they're going to be facing that, and I would love to hear their thoughts around that. We've even had recent suggestions about how we may recover into next year, depending on where the vaccine goes. So I think, financials and levy is correct. I think COVID recovery at some point is correct. College and career academies, I think, is correct.
Yeah, I would also add equity. I think that's important as well. I mean, this district was the first in the nation to declare racism a public health emergency, and there's been an equity plan that's followed. So, I mean, that might be something else to highlight. I mean, I'll defer to my colleagues, Dr. Akbar and others on this that are equity experts. But I would think that we want to make sure that whoever we hired understood that our commitment to equity as we move forward.
Miss Vital or Miss Autry has something too. Sorry, two Dianas.
Yeah, I actually was going to say exactly what Derek just mentioned. I think it's important that advancing our racial equity goals in this district is very important. I mean, we have a lot to offer. We have a lot that we can highlight, but I don't want a potential superintendent to come in thinking, that we have this solid foundation, it's going to be smooth sailing, smooth cruising. They need to be aware of what our challenges are and be in that mind frame of not only building upon our successes, but elevating our district to the next level as well. But racial equity was what I was going to mention as well. I think that's very important given our stance and our passing that policy this past summer.
Good.
I'm just echoing what Dr. Hall and Ms. Autry said about racial equity and equity in general. I think another thing that's going to be important is we have pretty great staff. So, like, for example, Mr. Pendleton and his finance team and a whole host of other teams. Actually, I'll probably miss somebody if I start naming all of them. So I don't want anybody to, take that as any slight or anything. But we have all these different teams that are doing great work. And many of them have been working for our district for 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And I think that helping whoever understand that we have, a long-standing history of staff working for us. And, with that said, I think when you think about implementing equity throughout the district and throughout everything we do, a person having a firm understanding of how to do that, knowing that requires cultural shift, and how to do that without hopefully, scaring everyone away, which is not easy, actually.
Great. Thank you. Anything else to add? Do you have anything, Mr. Alexander? I'm gonna put you on the spot.
No, I think they've answered most of what I say. I mean, I'm really big on the College and Career Academy because I know when we were talking about moving our district in a different direction, the superintendent and his staff went down and looked at this because we needed to be refreshed in that area. So that's good. I'm big on equity as well. So that's a piece there because I want to make sure that all of our students get what they need so they can be successful in the school district. So those are two major for me. I mean, I shouldn't say just two major because our students are very, very important, but our staff is too because the staff are very good staff. They work well. I think they're way up there when it comes to high level staff that we have. And so I want to make sure that they're taken care of as well. So those are the three that I think that are very important to me.
Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
I would agree too. I think my colleagues encapsulated everything really well. I think that, especially how Diana encapsulated it with, we do have a foundation, and there is room to build on. But I think that what you're hearing is we don't want to make any strong, left or right turns anywhere. We're not looking to veer off into some, different direction away from where we've been steering as far as the college and career academies especially are concerned. COVID's thrown us a loop that no one could have predicted. And so, that's a difficulty. And we're hoping that with Mr. Pendleton's guidance at the state level that we've seen that school finance gets some squaring away. So that would be lovely. But I can't add any more than what my esteemed colleagues have already said. Good job, everybody.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Steve, one more thing is somebody else who's going to come in and raise the bar, because I think our bar is high, but we need to, I believe in continuously raising the bar so you can continuously move. Once you reach some goals, then you set some higher goals and reach those goals as well, work towards reaching those goals. So I think somebody who's going to come in and not just be comfortable with, hey, I come into a district, they're doing well, and I can be content. No, we want them to be able to raise the bar.
Great, thank you. And you're, I think, just naturally progressing into that second question that I want to hear about, or what are the specific things you would like this new superintendent to do? And I have it listed there as first 100 days, first year, long term. Thinking, all three of those times.
I think for me, in order to really move the needle or keep the momentum going, and then I guess to even Bruce's point, raise the bar, move the needle, person's going to have to spend a lot of time, I think, really getting to know the district and getting to know the community and getting to know the people. So someone that can keep that focus on the district, but also within those first 100 days, within that first year, really get to know the field and who the players are and where the resources are. And I'm probably leading into some of my notes that I have on the next bullet point, but you see some of the organizations in this community that have struggled from a leadership perspective, and those that have are the ones that I think have maybe struggled where that executive that they brought in struggled in that collaboration, partnership, community space. Because as you've seen, even with college and career academies, to Bruce's point about, that's all built. And we heard about it today in our instructional policy committee meeting. It's all built on the partnerships and the collaboration. The success of that effort is really due in large part to that. So I think that immediately is getting to know the people, getting to know the community, getting to know us as board members.
And also to build on what Patrick is saying too, someone who's going to be able to relate, communicate, and work with our stakeholders, because our stakeholders we have some major stakeholders here who are supporting our school district, and they're going to have to be able to work with them as well, relate with them, communicate with them so they can continue to raise the bar with them as well, and vice versa.
Okay. Great. Good stuff. Anybody else?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I'll jump in. I mean, from a personal characteristics, I would say that we want somebody that is comfortable with working with a very active board. This, and this is my opinion I'm expressing, but I don't see this board as being a passive board. I see this board as being a very active board, which means we ask a lot of questions. We want to understand, what is being done and why it's being done, right? So, because this is a community where folks frequently ask a lot of questions of their board members. And for us to do our jobs, we have to be able to have a good working relationship with our superintendent, so, and a lot of that, Steve, as you know, is soft skills, right? So are you thoughtful enough to say, hey, you're my board, I'm going to schedule, monthly lunch with you all sort of once a month, or every quarter, my goal is to have lunch with you all at least one time, one-on-one, right? I mean, so I would want somebody that, I want to bring somebody in that really values building personal relationships, not just with our stakeholders. That's really important, but also with the folks on this board. So somebody that really understands, kind of the tenets of emotional intelligence, the way that it's defined by Daniel Goleman, right? So those are some of the things that I think are critical to add to comments that others have, because at day's end, we're a team. And I don't think anybody's looking for, no one's looking for a savior, and we're not looking for a superintendent, to come in that's going to save us. We're looking for someone that has valuable experience that will come in and work with us as well. So I think that's critical. Someone who leaves their ego at the door. I think that's critical. So servant leadership. Again, everything I'm saying would fall under the soft skills category. But it's those things that sort of drive organizational culture. I haven't seen Dr. James operate. I haven't seen Dr. James operate as if this is a top-down model. From what I've seen, he's been very collaborative and collegial with the board and with the folks on the senior team. So we wanted somebody that's going to come in and continue that style, if you will, and mode of communication. So we're, as we build our networks here, I've already kind of been talking to board members in other states, and there are some boards where the superintendent, he's on an island, and or he or she is used to sort of making all the decisions, and the board just kind of for lack of a better term, rubber stamps that, so that's not this board. So we just want to make sure that candidates, I think, understand that. At least that's my opinion. If my colleagues disagree, I'd welcome them to weigh in on it. But that's my read on kind of the current state and kind of my read on some of the things I'd like to see in our next superintendent. Yeah. Oh, and experiences, I think Ms. Victor may say as well, while I wouldn't call it a deal breaker, but I think classroom experience, I think, is always a plus. Although again, I don't know that that's a deal breaker, but I think, and I think experience, working with, folks in a minority community, or disadvantaged community. I shouldn't use the word minority, but disadvantaged, community. I think that's also something that is a plus if they have it, right? So, those are just some things off the top of my head, but I'll defer to my colleagues if they want to tweak anything that I've said or correct it.
That's valuable input. Thank you.
Valuable input. Thank you. I believe this is currently the case, but I'm not 100% sure. But I think the superintendent will need to, within some time frame, maybe 6 months of taking the job, if they're external. Well, I mean, heck, even if they're internal, because not everybody internally live in Akron either. But I think they should live within the district. And
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that too.
Yeah. Ditto.
Okay. Does everybody else agree with that? That's an important question I want to get to here.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
I think that's an ideal, but I don't know that, to me, that's necessarily a deal breaker. I mean, and you're talking to a girl who's lived in Akron for going on, I got a birthday next month. I'm not giving it up, but I'm telling you, I love it here, and I would love to see a superintendent live in town. We've been blessed to have Mr. James in town, Dr. James in town. But, and I would hope that would be something they would choose. But I don't know if I want to eliminate a candidate based on zip code. I wouldn't want somebody eliminating me as it can be a goal, but I don't know if that needs to be something that is a deal breaker for me right off the bat. Again, somebody who's never lived anywhere else, but I don't know.
Someone-
I think when you're talking about the school district, and who's going to be the public face of the school district, the community need to be assured that that person would send their kids to these schools and that they live within the school district boundaries. I think we send the wrong message by having an outsider, and I'm not saying outsider meaning the person hasn't worked for the district for years. I'm meaning outsider as far as residency, leading the school district. I don't think that sends a wise message. I'm not in support of that. And if we can legally make that residency a requirement, I will be in full support of making that happen.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further, Steve. It's a deal breaker for me. I'm just going to be transparent with this group. It's a deal breaker for me. So I can't envision a scenario where where my one vote, again, I'm 1 of 7, but I can't envision a scenario where I would vote in support of a candidate that was not going to commit to living in Akron. There are plenty of places to live in Akron that are nice and lovely and within walking distance of shops and et cetera. There's a lot to do in this city. It's a great city. So I just can't envision a scenario where I would be supporting a candidate that was not going to commit to live in the city limits. But that's my position as one of 7.
Yeah, I think that whoever we select, and I know it's the history of Akron Public Schools. There have been a number of superintendents in the past, and we've had, and I think even when they selected Dr. Greer years ago, he did come and move into the city, even though he moved out pretty quick, but he did live in the city. So I think all of our previous superintendents have lived within our city limits. I don't think they may have all started here, but they end up moving here to be part of our community. And I think that is important too, because there are events and so forth that go on throughout our community that they're going to be looked at as being there and expected to be there. I think we should expect them to be at various ones, and it might be good. And people to see them also. I mean, for example, I'll give a example of Dr. James. I mean, heck, I was out one day and I was shopping and he was shopping, but we saw each other. So people got a chance to see him. People got a chance to know who he is. And so I think it is important, that we have, someone who if they're not going to be here right away, if they're going to commit to coming to live in Akron.
Yeah, you have the right to make that request. We have a friend joining you. Well, the one thing I would say that would be less of a concern for me on that is that Akron certainly has so many possibilities for somebody moving in.
But you can. I think it's imperative that we say Akron City Schools District because there's 4 districts within the city of Akron. So even though we cover the vast majority of the city, you have Woodridge, you have Green on the far south. I think that's south side, whatever side that is.
Yeah, south.
Yeah, you have Springfield and Coventry. So
Revere
and Revere and yes.
That's why I'm a little split on this, and I see the merit. This is my personal opinion. I see the merits on both sides, but if we had a candidate that lived, say, in Fairlawn Heights, votes for council and votes for the mayor, but doesn't vote for school board, or lives, back up off of Fox Trace and those kinds of places, again, votes for the mayor, votes for school board, or votes for city council, doesn't vote for school board, those weird areas where we've given up through the annexation process. My initial thought was, well, I agree. I see the merits on both sides. I like the idea and I like the goal. I like the idea of having that person here. To Bruce's point, or whoever just said it about, or maybe it was Dr. Hall, about running into them at the grocery store. I do love that. There is something to be said about being able to see the person, as Dr. Akbar pointed out, that is the face of the district, that they're in this community. But I also recognize we may be eliminating even some potential candidates because maybe they do live close by, are very established, have homes, their children are grown, and a move a couple of miles into the district when they're very heavily involved here. When I think if the focus too is involvement, entrenchment, and really burying some roots in the community, if that is either already occurring or could occur, that's where my focus would be. I want to know that you're not traveling, outside of Summit County, for example, to go home and you're here from 8 to 5, and then we maybe don't see you or hear from you or don't run into you. So my only concern is what we might be cutting out. If like the question I would ask then is, what is the goal? Is the goal their zip code or their physical address, or is their goal their involvement in the community and their presence in the community? If that can be achieved, then I'm not necessarily personally as wed to where they lay their head at night for this. But I also get the other side. I'm waffling a little bit. I'm a little concerned that we make that decision too quickly. But
well, I think, Mr. Bravo, to your point, I mean, I think the right candidate first. So listen, I'd be one to do this, right? I'd be one to say, listen, if we end up hiring somebody who's internal, and that person doesn't live in Akron, I could see making an exception to that, right? So I say that's a very hard line. But the one thing I'll say is that my thought process at a high level is that the right candidate is going to want to live in the community in which they serve. That's just my, maybe that's overly idealistic, but that's just my thought.
Yeah, and I'm personally not interested in even making that exception for internal candidates. And we have some great internal candidates that live in Cuyahoga County and Portage County, which are great. And even Stark County. And this is not to dissuade them from being interested, but for me, I think that we should. This is how I'll put it. We have a levy that's potentially going on the ballot either May or November of next year. We haven't decided that as a board. We will at some point. We want to ensure that we can count on our superintendent's vote. We should be able to ensure that. And I think if they don't live within the district, you can't ensure that. And I think that, to me, that sends the wrong message. If they're the person, one of the people after hours, promoting the levy and the need for support in the district, aren't they able to put their money where their mouth is? I think that's important, especially the marginalized communities.
Yeah, I think that's well said. I get that point. I'm on board with that.
I would say that I think a commitment to the district as a job should include a commitment to the district for home. I think they absolutely should be a resident of the city.
And I piggyback it. I agree as well. I think it demonstrates a certain commitment to the district, if you're already a resident. And I mean, it's something that I would look at if my own superintendent didn't live in the, district that they are running, that it does send a message, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. So I think that's important moving forward.
Okay, that's good. I'll work that into the wording in the brochure. And so that's
when you do that, just make sure that, Steve, when you do that, make sure that you include some references to some websites that show all the lovely places in Akron to live. So because if you are from here and you look it up on a Wikipedia page, you might be like, what? Like, no way. I don't want to have to live in Akron city limits, right? I mean, so
actually,
might include some yeah.
My experience was in doing a lot more digging and looking at Akron was the thought that this is a city I'd love to live in. It's covered looking at that. some pretty amazing things that I didn't know about Akron. You guys have a vibrant city.
It's funny Dr. Hall said that, because the section that I probably made the most comments is the community section, and in particular the last paragraph. I'm like, there's so much we're leaving out. I mean, there's so many opportunities to like sell what's here in the community. And I put the metro parks, the zoo, the outstanding hospital system, Stark State College, we left off of there. I mean, there's so many things that it's where I made all my notes. And to your point, Dr. Hall, like, maybe if there's going to be wording in there about that, then maybe we beef that section up a little bit and talk about what's in the community.
Yeah, that makes sense. We'll have to pick and choose a little bit, because there's only so much space for words. But those are all important points.
And I don't think we should apologize either. Do you know what I mean? I think, like you've been saying, all of you, Akron is a beautiful place to live. I had a birthday last week, and my 61 years on this planet have been spent in Akron. And so I don't think if we're asking a superintendent to come and live here, we need to do it apologetically.
Absolutely.
Steve, putting that Akron is the greatest place to live this side of Northeast Ohio. So they need to know that.
And coming from someone who didn't live here, which may even be more of an argument, to move here. And I could have lived anywhere around here for the job that I took, but I chose to live here. So, I mean, these are all great points, I think, probably on both sides, but that's why we're having.
Well, I just had a comment. I mean, Ms. McKittrick, did you say 61 or did you mean 4-1? Because I was thinking that you were more like 4-1. So I'm shocked. So I'm surprised because you meant 4-1, right? Not 6-1 there?
Yeah.
For birthday?
That's why my little avatar is up there.
Okay.
It's a lovely avatar. Okay, good. So I'll look forward to seeing your comments there in terms of wording for the community. Obviously, it's important, but everything you're sharing with me now is great recruiting fodder as well, as we're talking to people. So I appreciate that. I do want to run down and get your thoughts in terms of how important they are to you, whether it's required, preferred, or you really don't have a feeling one way or the other. And I'll just start at that first one, at the doctorate.
For me, I think it would be preferred. I don't think it should be mandatory.
Right. I say preferred too, because when Dr. James came, he didn't have it, but we have a good person in him, and he went back and got his doctorate. So he's a doctor now. So I don't think it should be up front either.
Agreed.
Preferred.
Preferred, but not required.
Agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I mean, just to, I don't mean to cut, to jump ahead. I'm preferred on most of these.
Right.
I should see what my colleagues say, but I don't know that I'm personally want to box myself in and say required on any of these. Yeah.
I wanted to get your thoughts actually on that second one about superintendent experience and where you guys see yourselves on that.
I don't think it's necessary. I think we might overlook some really good candidates who might bring fresh eyes that have not been superintendents before. I would, again, to use Derek's phrase, I would hate to box ourselves into requiring that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that you have to, I mean, how do you become a superintendent, right? You don't always have already been a superintendent. I don't think that makes a great superintendent necessarily. It could. I mean, we could get the best candidate could already be a superintendent somewhere. The best candidate could also be assistant superintendent somewhere, or director of curriculum or something like that. We, principal of, a large high school with, 6,000-7,000 students. I don't know, but I wouldn't want to say superintendent experience was preferred or required. I wouldn't even put that in there. I would say what I'm more concerned with is that I'm not on required, but I'm very close to required when it comes to teaching experience. I think it's very
Same.
essential. But I
I
also
agree.
don't want to say it required, Ms. McKittrick. I don't know about you, but I don't want to say required because then that might leave somebody good out, you know. But I
I'm not going to put these things specifically in the brochure, but I want to know where you guys stand on this, or how strongly you feel about each one of these.
I feel strongly about teaching experience. I won't say it would exclude someone without teaching experience, but I think it's very important. I think not only from a district leadership standpoint, but I think with regard to negotiations, I think it's very important that so you have a little bit of feel of both sides, and I think it makes for a fair negotiation and a fair final agreement.
This is Diana. I agree wholeheartedly with that. And that would be, for me, teaching experience. That would be required for me. I think with the superintendent being the educational leader of the district, should definitely have educational experience in the classroom. To me, that's major in terms of our relationships with our teaching staff, as well as what she just mentioned.
Good.
I'm probably with Dr. Akbar. I think it's obviously for me, I think it's obvious, it's a preference. I hedge to make it a requirement for the same reason Dr. Akbar mentioned. There are good candidates out there that may not necessarily have it. Dr. James didn't have it. I'm very close to more preferred, but not necessarily required.
So it sounds like we're across the board pretty much in that very preferred range that you would like to see.
Yeah, I would say. I'd say the same thing. I'm like a half step short of making the teaching experience required, but I'm almost there. But I'm just trying to allow for the possibility that somebody comes out of the blue, that's just fantastic and checks every box, but maybe doesn't happen to have classroom experience. I mean, I can't envision that, but I just want to allow for the mathematical possibility of it.
Okay.
Right. I don't want to close the door on any qualified candidate, right? But again, if dreams are free, then that's my first choice.
Sure.
And I lean toward preferred, especially for the reasons that Mrs. McKittrick mentioned. The reason that I keep that door open is because of the superintendent we currently have, who didn't have teaching experience and has been a fantastic superintendent and has partnered well with the academic side. And we do have a very strong curriculum and instruction area and team, so that back him up. So that's been built and intentionally because of that. So I would never shut that door just because of the success we've had for the last 12 years.
And Steve, I'm more preferred, but I'm not going to say I'd box that person either, because there have been a couple of people who were in our district as well who didn't really do much teaching in the classroom, but they were good administrators. And I think there's a couple of them who were probably out there who are probably I know a couple maybe superintendents out there, and not maybe in Ohio, but in other states as well. So it's kind of preferred, but I'm not going to box ourselves in either. If it's a good candidate and they don't have it, hey, just like Lisa said to Dr. James, he was in the business, but he brought the business and they joined together and created a good piece here. But it is good for someone who have the experience of being in the classroom, know what the classroom is like, what's going on in the classroom, understand where the teachers are coming from, where principals are in the schools and things of that nature, and understanding the students because they've been in that classroom. But I'm not going to close the door on may not have it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's valuable. I do also want to hear about central office and building administrator and how you guys feel about those two areas. Let's start with central office.
Steve, are you saying is required or?
Just kind of as we've been discussing, how important is that to you as we look at candidates?
I can't think it's important to know what role you have as an administrator and be able to carry out the roles of the job and the role of administrator. So I think they need to. I'm not going to say it's required, but they should have some experience, maybe a little bit of experience or knowledge. I should say, maybe that's a better word, more knowledge about that, and be able to hopefully carry out the administrative duties.
I guess like many of the other characteristics that you've kind of brought up here, I think some of them are preferential or ideal to me. So I guess I would have almost the same statement for every single one, but they're not necessarily required. And there are a lot of things that this district, to me, is doing, whether it's college and career academies, whether it's equity and racial justice, whether it's, I mean, it could be human resources, where I think, if we want to move the needle, if we want to really make change, if we want to do things differently, if we want to, raise the bar, then locking ourselves into any necessary, any of these characteristics, to me is maybe a little too narrow, although they may be preferential. So even central office, I mean, it used to be, whether teachers to, maybe assistant principals to central office to superintendent, or to, sort of a director level position of HR, but maybe, short of going through those things was not necessarily an HR position. And we've seen the difference, for example, in HR operations at our district, from going with, someone who is HR and maybe didn't take a traditional pathway through the K-12 education system to become the director of HR. So again, for me, I think, as Bruce said, maybe that's some experience is great or preferential, or maybe it's ideal, but it's not necessarily required. And that's how I feel about a few of these. When we talked about doctorate and superintendent and central office, maybe they're great and they're ideal, or they're preferential, but for me, none of them are really required. I don't feel strongly about any of them, to be honest.
Okay.
And I'm gonna say I'm strongly about two. I'm strongly preferred on the teaching and required on the residency within the actual district limits. The others are, you see what kind of that nice blend of everything. One of the things that's not on here that I think we need to discuss is superintendent's licensure. And if a person doesn't have a superintendent license, if we decide to go down that route, they should have a time frame on when they should have that completed. I don't think we should hire someone who
That's built into the provisional status. It is possible if you're coming from outside, for instance, there's reciprocity with many states, but you can also get a provisional status in terms of licensure, but that's for a period of time, and then you have to complete the necessary requirements to get the actual Ohio license.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's also an alternative pathway to superintendent's licensure as well. But I just wanted to make sure we put that out there that
our standard language says that you have to have superintendent licensure.
The provisional aspect makes me a bit nervous. I would hate to think we'd bring somebody on expecting them to get a have a provisional license, expecting to make it permanent. And then if they don't, we're going to be in a position of looking for another superintendent. So that makes me a little nervous.
Yeah, I've never actually encountered that, to be honest with you.
Well, that's good.
Certainly have had candidates that have applied without licensure, and I have yet to work with a board that's even interested in talking to those candidates ultimately.
Well, I don't think Dr. James had a license when we hired him, and I wasn't on the board then, but I don't believe he did, but he got it. And my whole point is, we can say we want them to already have it, but he's proven that you can do the alternative pathway and be good. So I don't want to just say that they're automatically out, but we do need to give them a time frame, which I don't. Maybe Ryan knows, or Bruce, or someone knows what that time frame was, but we definitely need to figure that out and put that up.
Yeah, and Dr. James came before I came on the board as well. He was there, but I do know that they did give him a time frame to get his certification, and then he went back. He got the certification. He brought it to us and showed us. Because by that time, I was on the board, and he had it, and then he went back to get his doctorate. So that's the history there.
The alternative pathway that Steve mentioned is very regimented in the state of Ohio. So once the board appoints an alternative licensure pathway, there's certain requirements that the candidate has to fulfill, especially not coming from a teaching background. But that's the alternative licensure pathway is the avenue in which Dr. James came to us from. So there's a lengthy process, but it's all components have to be fulfilled within 5 years.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility. I have never encountered that in the searches that I've been involved in.
Yeah, I just put it out there. This board can decide that we're not interested in that anymore, but I know it is a possibility.
That's something I would leave for potential consideration when you see the candidates themselves. Somebody jumps off the page that seems to have all the skills, and then you want to have that conversation. Okay, but let's wait and see if you have somebody that even falls into that category.
Right. Well, the reason why I mentioned it is, or followed up on it, was because you mentioned that the job posting will have that in there as a requirement. And then the provisional thing for those who are out of state, if they come in for the transfer of their superintendent license, that, from what you said, does not cover a scenario like the one I'm presenting. So I wanted to make sure that if we are open to it, which we probably should decide today, that language is doesn't exclude individuals who don't have it already, unless that's what we decide. So
yeah, I agree with that. I think, Steve, philosophically, I like to cast as broad in it as possible, both at the state and national level, and then if we get 50 candidates, which I don't think is going to happen, but we got, then that's a problem I'd like to have, right? As opposed to having too few candidates. I love to have too many candidates. All right, now we can kind of start to apply some of these items in A through G with a bit more specificity, to narrow down a pool that may happen to be gigantic, so.
Okay. What about, and you guys can weigh in on this. This is, again, for my knowledge, we're not going to publish it, but have you talked about salary range and potential benefits?
We have not, and actually, as part of your agenda just today, because I had looked at spent time on the district brochure and the timeline, but I hadn't really paid attention to the agenda because I don't know why. But anyway, I asked for Mr. Pendleton to get us a copy of the current contract so that all the board members have a current copy of the contract. And we spoke just right at the beginning of the instructional policy meeting. So he's going to get us that. And then I was going to ask you, does OSBA have or do you provide or can you provide a salary survey so we kind of know where we are? There was a time when overall salary and benefits, we were pretty far down the list, like maybe in the bottom third or so, I think I was told, in terms of salary and benefits for superintendents. So maybe just, and if not, or if you can or need to, work with Mr. Pendleton to put one together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can work on that.
Okay. So I think that would be beneficial for all of us to know where we currently are, where we stack up against other districts, what we provide in salary and benefits versus maybe what some others do. Because I also know just from our prior conversations, our superintendent has foregone probably several benefits that I know are typical for other superintendents across the state. So I would just be curious to see where we stand. And anybody else, feel free to jump in if that's not okay. But
it'll be interesting to me too, just to see where we stand nationwide, not just in Ohio, but nationwide too. I mean, that gives a better look too, because you're gonna look at some of these candidates if they're coming from out of state. Hopefully, looking at the cost of living in Akron and Ohio and comparing and saying, okay, the salary, because some of them are probably gonna be looking for high salary, and they're probably gonna say, oh no, I'm not gonna go to a school district like Akron, but I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to me just to see where we stand in Ohio and nationwide.
And somewhere in there, in that analysis or in that survey, it should include some apples to apples comparisons, with like districts, so that we also know where we compare to, fairly urban, 21,000 student type of districts, I guess, that cover 62 square miles and
located in northeastern Ohio. Okay.
I was wanted to just add that, I'm really interested more so in, our comparison to, let's say, a Toledo or a Youngstown or Dayton.
It's in that range. And
Yeah, they're probably more, apples to apples than anyone else. I mean, even though Cleveland is close, they're a much larger district than we are. And Columbus is bigger than everyone else. So that's kind of where I would think we would want to look at. The other thing is, and I could be wrong in thinking this, but it's taken Dr. James 12 years to get to the point that he is at. Does it make sense to start where he is or go above it? Because that's the other thing. What you see trend wise is the person who comes after ends up making much more than the person who left. And I'm not sure I like that model.
but I think you're right to look at that apples to apples comparison. See where they are. And we can also, factor in tenure of existing superintendent. Are we talking about somebody who's been there for 6-7 years, or is it somebody who's only been there for 2 or 3 years? That makes a difference. So
yeah, I think to Dr. Akbar's point too, there's a way to adjust with those districts like Youngstown, for example, to take what salary and benefits they have and adjust to us, if you will, or adjust down from a Franklin County or down from a Cleveland municipal or metropolitan. So there's a way to do that comparison. I think those are important. Youngstown, Cleveland, I think all of those are good. And then to the other point, adjusting or taking a look at then what those salary ranges maybe were and what those people make and what experience and qualifications and how many years of experience do they have, because to Dr. Akbar's point, that may or may not makes sense for them to be making more. I mean, if not that we're going to get them, but if, you know, the person from Los Angeles Unified or something decided they were retiring in Akron, Ohio, you know, then certainly we're in a different place than we maybe otherwise would be. So it would be important to know also for those comparison districts, what's the very generic profile of the person that's in that position that's within that range or.
Okay. Good.
And
That'll give me some good things to work on there.
And can I add, this is actually for Ryan. I don't want to, I also want to consider our financial health when we're talking about salary of the superintendent. You know, we already know financially, I mean, we're at the end of our rope. And so I don't want to overcommit us. So I hope this never happens, but if the levy doesn't pass and fair funding doesn't pass, you know, those are two things that are critical to our health, our viability. And we don't know the answers to either one of them yet. And so to commit ourselves for 5 years or however many years we end up entering a contract with someone, I think would not be advised. And maybe Mr. Pendleton may tell us it makes more sense to do a 2-year or a 3-year contract instead of a 5-year because of those unknowns. So I would like to know those things, and I think you might be able to help us with that, Mr. Pendleton.
And I forgot to add to, I also asked Mr. Pendleton to include information for the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the treasurer so that we just know where those sort of top folks are. So when we get that, you should get all of it.
Okay.
All right, a couple of considerations there. One, at least from my experience, it's best for the board to do that due diligence with its peer group and salary schedule and total compensation. Unfortunately, you know, I'm not picking on Youngstown or any other district, but Youngstown has 5,000 students. They educate 5,000 students. Now they're one of the big 8, but we really do need to get to like districts and total compensation. I know Dr. Akbar, you're shaking your head, but with choice options,
I'm not shaking my head because I disagree with you. I'm shaking my head in shock.
I know it.
Only 5,000 students.
That is shocking, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, it's not just the big 8 who we need to look at. It's the Southwesterns, it's the Olentangies, it's the sizable districts in the state of Ohio.
Because there's Lakota and other districts that.
Right. So we'll put together, I'll work with Steve and we'll bounce some ideas off each other, and it's not just base compensation, it's total compensation. And that's where the contractual details that Mr. Bravo talked about, that'll come in relevant. The best component, at least this is my opinion and my experience, is for the board to declare a range commensurate with experience that is comfortable but yet competitive on both the statewide and the national marketplace. Knowing that you're right, when it comes to salary, sometimes we have to step a little bit outside of our comfort range. But there are 2 positions in which the district has to employ, and that's the superintendent and treasurer. To that end, you find the right candidate for your superintendent and you lock them up for an appropriate period of time. And I would say 1-year contracts are very unheard of for a first-year contract, and 5-year contracts are very unheard of for a first-year contract, and it tends to be in between, with 3 being the average. So around those, yes, you're right, finances are going to be tough, but not to have the leader of the district to work with the Board of Education would be even more difficult. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background, but I think we ought to revisit the total compensation package and do some additional research.
Yeah. And I want you thinking about that now, as opposed to when you want to make a decision on a superintendent.
And we can include that for upcoming executive session material.
Yes,
depending
please.
on
Lord,
what
that was a lot.
Okay, let's talk about internal candidates. How many do you think you might have? You have a thought on that?
Solidly, I've only heard of one, two, three at the most, 1 to 3.
Okay.
That would be interested in applying. I think some of that probably depends on who would be interested in actually put their name forward, but I wouldn't say more than 1 to 3 unless anybody disagrees. I've only heard.
Patrick, Mr. Brown, I haven't heard any, but I know that there would probably be one that I would soon. But other than that, I don't know anyone else. I haven't heard anything, so that may be some information that you have gotten, but I haven't heard and haven't really talked to anybody about it either.
Yeah, it's good to have an idea how many you have. As I'm talking to people, invariably one of the first questions they're going to ask is, are there internal candidates? So.
And I'm not sure if we will fully know. I mean, I think that it will be wise of us to assume everyone who's a director or executive director in central office could apply. I think it also would be wise of us to consider some of our principals may apply. So how do I say this? I think that if you look at the job descriptions that we've talked about, if I were anyone in any of those positions listening to this meeting, I could see myself saying, I might want to apply. I could fit that criteria, thinking about who we have and the talent we have in the district.
I would
more than 3.
I agree, Dr. Akbar, and I think that, and I hope in this district that there's been an encouragement for some of those staff to apply, because we do have a it's even a policy, right, that we want to grow our own, from student board members up to superintendent, right? So hope and so many of our staff have been teaching staff for 20, 30 years before they jump to an administrative position and move into something downtown or at the building level. So I believe there's been that encouragement in the time that Bruce and I and Patrick have been on the board, and I certainly hope that that they would feel like they could come forward. They certainly know our past and current strategic planning and how important it is for us to have that. So I hope that there would be some.
Yeah, this is Derek. I mean, listen, I don't know how we quantify whether or not we've encouraged or whether we are going to encourage internal candidates to apply for the job. I mean, but I don't know that I just want to say, oh, well, we encourage it and we leave it to chance, right? I mean, I think that there needs to be some sort of communication, either strategy or expectation, that we're going to put in place here in the next, I don't know, 4, 6, 8 weeks, where we're communicating out that we're looking for a superintendent. I almost said Super Nintendo, my God. But a superintendent, and actively put out emails where we're encouraging people to apply. Because I mean, listen, I would love to see some building principals apply, and even though you might say, well, gosh, they're long shot candidates, I'd love to see them apply just to get the experience, if nothing else. So I very much hope that there's I guess I can follow back up with our board leadership, I guess to get those questions answered. But I'd love to kind of find out what's that cadence and what's that communication, going to actually look like, one that we employ or deploy to encourage candidates who are internal to apply.
And I'm not sure if I disagree, but I'm not sure if I agree with Dr. Hall. So I don't know how to say this, but let me just say that I do not think, unless we all agree that there's someone we want to approach because we are very interested in hiring them, that we should be having conversations like that with everyone. And the reason why I say that is, I don't want to give anyone false hope. So if, I think that if we had a person or two people who were like, you know what, these are two people we really want to consider, let's have conversations with those two people. If there's two, I'm just using that arbitrarily, so no one take those numbers to be factual. But let's do that instead of doing a broad open call to encourage everyone, to apply, like kind of rapid fire. I think either we're going to have a truly open search where everyone who feels that they are interested and qualified will apply, or we have a sham of a search where we pick people that we want and include other people and waste other people's time. I think that I'm just not in agreement with wasting someone's time if we feel like there's one or two people we definitely want to hire. I don't think that is the case, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, and I think
Go ahead, Mr. Bravo.
Well, I was just going to say, I think I probably lean a little toward Dr. Akbar, and I think just from what I've heard too, and speaking even with our own leadership, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but internal candidates can be tricky, especially and they can be a little difficult. I think for boards and districts, because someone is going to get selected and many folks are not. So when the potential too that you end up pitting internal candidates against each other, that certain staff or even leadership, those in district leadership start lining up with certain folks. I mean, it can get a little dicey. And again, I have recently heard some real world stories about that, just as people were passing along some knowledge to me. So I do think we need to be very careful about how we do that. And I don't know, Mr. Horton, if you have any experience with that or if you have any thoughts around it.
I think you have to be in your minds, and as we start talking about candidates down the road, we'll definitely have the conversation about internal candidates. Do you automatically offer them an interview? Do they have to go through the process? And maybe they don't. How you handle that is going to be very important. So I agree with you, Mr. Bravo, that it has to be thought out in advance. It can be a bad situation for people who apply internally. And then the other thing that we don't want to happen on our end is that good qualified candidates that you should be considering might not consider the job because they think there's internal candidates that would be in front of them in terms of consideration. So so that's something that we need to have a good idea about going into it. How many do you have, and how serious are those candidates, if at this point.
I think if we're going to open it up to internal candidates, and I definitely think we should, I think they should go through the same process that everyone goes through. I don't think from an equity standpoint, it's good practice to let them skirt certain aspects of the process.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, and this is where I struggle, right? Because if we've got candidates who are internal, the reason why I was saying, to Dr. Akbar's point, the reason why I was saying, inquiring about the mechanism by which we would encourage people to apply is because, I can't think of a fair, unbiased way to signal to qualified internal candidates to apply other than a generalized email encouraging qualified candidates to apply. Because the moment that a board member or board members start approaching individual folks and encourage them to apply, you've already injected bias into the process.
Yeah, I would not suggest that.
Say what?
I would not suggest that.
Right, right. So to me, like, because we've been talking about, well, how would we encourage certain people to apply that are internal? There are one or two people that we think are qualified. Well, I don't know that the board can approach any of those folks. So then who does it fall to? Does it fall to the superintendent to encourage those folks? I mean, that's just awkward to me. So that's why I kind of, as a default, I kind of fell back to, well, maybe we just encourage district leadership to put out an email blast saying, hey, this job is being posted. And, and once we have a JD up, a job description up, we'd ask you all candidates who are qualified to look at the job description and consider applying. I don't know of a more fair, to use Ms. McKittrick's point, I don't know of a more fair, equitable way to do that. Mr. Horton, you have any, Steve, you have any thoughts on that?
I don't even know if that's necessary. Sorry, but I mean, they know we're doing a superintendent search.
Right.
Well,
It's going to be posted. So they're in the district, they know. I don't know that we'd even have to send a separate email or a separate ask, because they know in the district that that's where we are.
and
That's fair.
And,
Yeah.
can I just make a comment? I think that everyone in our district and people even outside of our district know that we're looking for a superintendent. If there's individuals who are in our district who feel they are qualified and think they can run the district, and I think they're going to apply. So I don't think we need to do anything. We just let the process go. It's out there. It's been stated. Everyone knows. If there's individuals in our district who want to apply for the position, they can go ahead and apply. And just like everyone else, and as Ms. McKittrick said, that they go through the same process as everyone else. So that way it's fair, it is equitable, and they don't have any problems or issues. So everyone goes through the same process.
I think I agree with that. And in terms of your involvement in that, is whether or not they apply. If somebody were to ask, hey, is it open to internal people? Yeah, absolutely. You're free to apply. But yeah, I mean, to the extent that, talking to people about applying, or something encouraging somebody to apply, that I would hope you don't go down that road. Just, stay out of it and let those people apply if they feel like they're qualified and they really want to seek the position.
I agree. I think we let the process work itself out.
Yeah. And it will. I think, so if what I'm hearing is correct, that it would be your desire that they do go through the vetting process, and if there's somebody that rises to that level of being invited to an interview, then they're invited to the interview. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, for me,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, good.
Yes, for me.
Yes, for me. Yep.
Okay, good. In terms of the focus groups, I just need to know who I should be working with to potentially set these up. And internally, is there a go-to person within your central office that you would suggest I talk to or work with?
I feel like Ryan would be a good start. That's my opinion. I feel like he's fairly neutral in that respect. He's secretary to the board. You guys are probably going to be working together anyway on putting together some salary analysis, but unless someone has another thought, I think Ryan's a good start.
I agree.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. And again, as we've already talked about, it's going to be depending on whether or not we can even reasonably bring people together in person. So.
And Ryan, if you were listening, you were just voluntold. So.
No, I got you. Okay, so I'm right here with you on that, Mr. Pendleton. Sounds good. Okay, good. And then I'll also need, should I go through Mr. Pendleton as well in terms of arranging to get some images for the brochure?
Yeah, he can connect you with Mark Williamson and the folks that do all of our media. So.
Okay. Good. Yeah, Steve, just email me exactly what you need to complete the whole brochure, and I'll get it wrapped up even tomorrow if we need to. Great. Okay. So I'll send that out, and Mr. Pendleton, I won't actually do that until Monday of next week.
in terms of moving forward. That let you guys enjoy Thanksgiving.
No worries. We're running.
I have a feeling it's going to be working, so.
Well, we have covered a lot of ground. And I realize we've been here a while, but I appreciate everything you've shared with me. My next steps are going to be that I will send out that timeline that we worked on with those dates on for everybody. My ask for all of you is to respond back regarding the brochure, keeping in mind that we do need to maybe hold off on portions of that regarding the strategic initiative, the strategic plan. So, but as you feed that information back to me, what I'll do is incorporate it into the draft and then give it back to you. So we're working through an iterative process to get to a brochure draft that everybody can agree to. I'll work with Mr. Pendleton in terms of moving forward with potential focus groups and images to complete the brochure. And then as we move down the road, we may want to schedule another virtual get-together as we get into this farther to really solidify the plans for that second round interview process. I've got good ideas on paper here in terms of what we talked about, but we will need to come together and make sure that we're all on the same page for that. So, okay.
Sounds
So,
good.
does that sound good for everybody?
Yes. And Mr. Ward, it's your birthday tonight as well, right?
It is, yes.
Thank you for sharing it with us.
Aw,
Happy birthday, Steve.
Happy
birthday. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Miss Autry was doing some homework.
What's that?
I said Miss Autry did some homework.
I thought I saw it in one of the emails.
Yeah, I didn't go to email. I just want to make you feel bad that, no, I'm kidding. No, it's I thank you. I appreciate that. I feel good. I appreciate all the information you've shared with me. This has been valuable for me. And I think we're ready to move forward. And we're gonna have a good search and find you the right superintendent.
Great. Anybody have any final questions for Mr. Horton? All right. Well, seeing none, we don't have any other business. So Mr. Horton, if that's it from you, then we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Don't move.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. McKittrick, and I think Mr. Alexander was the second. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Everyone have a good evening. Have a good holiday.
Thank
you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.